Hello, I'm Tom, and today I'm talking about learned helplessness. Learned helplessness is a way of being that can occur after a person experiences repeated stressful situations. They arrive at a conclusion where they believe that they're unable to control or change the situation, so they kind of stop trying, even when, and this is the significant part, even when opportunities for change do in fact become available. There will always be things in life we cannot change or influence, like the past, the weather, other people's behaviour and so on. However, learned helplessness is where we don't act to change something we're not happy with, even when presented with the chance to do so. Rather like saying, why should I bother? I already know there's no point. Some simple examples of what learned helplessness could look like in practice might be a person who continues to smoke despite several attempts to quit may cause the person to come to the conclusion that they will simply always be a smoker. Or someone finding that they are unable to lose weight, even with various dietary or lifestyle changes, may reach a belief that it will never happen and they'll give up trying ever again. The term learned helplessness was first coined back in 1967 after a series of scientific observations regarding animals, and it was suggested that the findings could also apply to humans. Experiencing learned helplessness is very understandable, but it doesn't help improve anything. In fact, it leads to increased feelings of stress and depression. For some people, it is linked with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Psychologist Professor Martin Seligman, who helped define learned helplessness, identified three key features. 1. People becoming passive in the face of trauma. 2. People who have difficulty learning that our responses can help address trauma. 3. Learned helplessness can increase related to stress levels. A person's life experiences can increase their chances of arriving at a point of learned helplessness. It typically begins after experiencing repeated traumatic events such as childhood abuse or domestic violence. However, not everyone who goes through these kind of distressing experiences will automatically develop learned helplessness. Some do, some don't. How people describe past events to themselves seems to be a significant factor. This is what we call the individual's explanatory style. People with a pessimistic explanatory style, which causes them to view negative events as unavoidable and a result of their self-perceived failings or errors, for example, it was all my fault, are more likely to experience learned helplessness. People with an optimistic explanatory style are less likely to do so, and I'll come on to how to adopt an optimistic explanatory style in a minute. How would you know if you might be in a place of learned helplessness? Well, when faced with difficult situations, you may feel immediately overwhelmed, struggle to make decisions, either become totally passive or alternatively lash out with inappropriate aggression. Perhaps you give up quickly, choosing not to ask for help, automatically assume the worst case scenario, or have negative thoughts such as thinking you don't deserve any better, or put events down to my constant bad luck, or attribute blame to others for feeling stuck. There can be physical symptoms of learned helplessness that arise at stressful times too, such as exhaustion, clouded thinking, disconnection, heaviness in the body, stress headaches, unexplained aches and pains, or feeling like you're coming down with a virus. If we always respond to life's challenges with learned helplessness, it negatively impacts on several key aspects of our well-being. It makes it hard to have healthy relationships. We can become overly dependent on others or stay in toxic relationships because we feel unable to leave. We struggle to fulfill our potential. Perhaps we don't apply for paid work as we fear it'll be too stressful. Or we don't follow our dreams and aspirations because we're already sure we'll never achieve them. The net result is an existence of constant low self-esteem and worsening mental well-being. The good news is, however, learned helplessness doesn't have to be lifelong. With changes to our lifestyle and thinking habits, it can be unlearned. Essentially, learned helplessness is like a form of conditioning. Conditioning is based on the idea that if something is reinforced or rewarded, we are more likely to repeat that behaviour again. And likewise, if we're punished, we're more likely to avoid that same behaviour in the future. Unlearning our helplessness mindset and deconditioning our responses takes practice and repetition. By moving away from learned helplessness, we become more positive and we can grow and thrive. Try new and interesting experiences. So, how do we do this? First and foremost, it's about changing what we call our explanatory style. If we have a pessimistic style, it might sound like, there must be something wrong with me. I'll never be able to make this better. This will happen again and again, I just know it. Which has the language characteristics of being internal, long-lasting and global, meaning it's all down to us, it's permanent and it happens every time without fail. What we need to move to is an optimistic explanatory style that is more external, temporary and situation specific. Things like, no wonder I wasn't thinking clearly, I was tired from working so hard. Yes, it happened once, but that doesn't mean it'll always happen in the future. Okay, so I made a mistake. I can't be good at everything or perfect 100% of the time. Physical exercise helps too. A study of rats that use their running wheels was seen to be less likely to exhibit learned helplessness. And that wasn't about how much exercise they did, but any exercising at all. Now, I do agree, we're not rats, but regular physical activity helps lift learned helplessness and other related symptoms like depression. Self-care is important too. People experiencing learned helplessness can often neglect their own needs. So eating healthily, or mindfulness, or sleep hygiene, or even getting some fresh air all help. We also need to identify if we're repeating to ourselves limiting beliefs. When beliefs about ourselves are overly negative, it leads to a negative self-view and a sense of powerlessness, even when change is possible. Try finding evidence that opposes any unhelpful thoughts to feel more empowered and more confident. Watch out for the voice of our inner critic, that voice in our head that puts ourselves down, criticises excessively, exaggerates the importance of past errors and stops our hopes and dreams before we've even started out. We can either choose not to buy into the inner critic's opinion or turn the so-called statement of fact from the inner critic voice into a question, so we can explore possibilities and options. A very effective counter to learned helplessness is well-being planning, and in particular, setting SMART goals. That's the acronym for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and time-focused. Making even small changes daily leads to great results. So every day, take at least one small action to the end goal. Then take a moment to celebrate each small win and milestone on the route to your objectives. Finally, focus your time and efforts on what you can control rather than what you can't, such as anything in the past. Long-term learned helplessness is related to feeling unable to control the outcome of situations. Therefore, to overcome learned helplessness, we need to identify the things we do have some control over, like our choices, our responses to situations, and focus on them rather than on what we can't. Finding we have ended up in a place of learned helplessness is not our fault. There is no need to blame ourselves or feel bad about it. But insisting on staying in this state and taking no action to address it is a decision and a choice. So to become free of this restrictive, unhelpful mindset, change the explanatory style to external, temporary, situation specific, take some exercise, practice the self-care techniques that work for you, avoid taking everything the inner critic says as gospel, focus on what you can influence and control, and set SMART goals as part of your well-being planning. See you for another topic video very soon.